Yeah, let's move on to talk about the one Miami Heat, who a team that again has stayed pat. They get Tyler Herro back from injury, and that's where I want
Yeah.
to start with this. I do just want to say I kind of think that Tyler Herro might be the most important player on this team this year because they didn't trade him. They need him to do something important for this team to recreate some of the success, and he's the one variable they didn't have for much of last season. And I think he also is someone that's probably going to come in based on his tweets and based on just what I kind of feel like I know about here. I think he's going to come in with an edge, and I think he's the answer for
Yeah,
this.
he's got like the biggest chip on his shoulder right now. He has been dangled in trade talks for now at least 2 summers. The Heat front office went out of their way, Pat Riley specifically, in his annual end of season press conference in June, went out of his way to call Tyler Hero basically a franchise building block. And I found that very interesting at the time. And the way I read it at the time was he is protecting Tyler Hero. I don't. People are like, oh, he's just talking him up for other rival front offices. Like, what front office is gonna be like, oh, he's calling him a building block now? I completely changed my opinion about Tyler Hero. Like, no front office acts like that. I think he was doing it for Tyler Hero. Like, that's who he was talking to in that press conference, knowing that very well that they could dangle him in trade talks, but if it didn't work out, um, that he wanted to have that out there in the public. Like that entire Pat Riley press conference was hedging in the case that the Damian Lillard trade did not get done, and we see now why, because they couldn't get the deal done. So I think Tyler Hero's whole thing is fascinating. I do expect him to come. People are wondering if he's going to come back and if he's going to play hard and all these things. Like I'm with you, Chris. I think he's going to come back and he's just be like, if you don't want me, somebody's going to want me, and I'm just going to show up everybody. And by the way, I'm making $20 million this year, so f you. Like it's just he's just so used to it now, and I think that does sort of fuel him. And the locker room wasn't trying to trade him. You know what I mean? Like Eric Spoelstra necessarily was not trying to trade him. Like you could still be in there and just be like, hey, management sucks, but we're all in this together, employees. You know what I mean? So I think it'll be fine.
I also don't
I do.
think those players are gonna like let him
No
take
way.
like f around,
Yeah, he'll get benched. I
right?
mean, he literally, like, if he just like stops playing defense or something, like he'll just get benched, and that'll be it.
I do think two guys know like kind of the hierarchy of things, and it's like it's one thing if you're being dangled in trade talks for like I don't know, even Drew Holiday,
Right.
but it's like it's Damian Lillard, like I think Tyler Hero would do
Yeah.
that trade, even if it sucks to deal with. I think too, to your guys' point, like Miami has a certain tolerance for allowing that stuff to become a problem, and it's like even if they kind of created the problem, they're going to expect everybody to go right back to business. I think so. He's not maybe going to have the luxury of figuring it out. But so my question with him though, his numbers have been like I think he's just a really good offensive player, like period. And I think he provides a little bit more in terms like he can stay out there and be a part of a good team defense. He's shown that. I think his size, he rebounds, like he affects the game in some other ways. His offensive game has rounded out, I think, but my question would be, he is 23 going on, he'll turn 24 this year. What's the way that his game moves forward from here? I think that's, to me, like aside from just, okay, do it in the playoffs, which is a little bit of a real reasonable thing to ask of him, because I think he has had a little bit of a dip when the postseason comes around. So that's one aspect. But Wes, what do you think is like the next step for him if he's going to improve as a player, become like that bona fide franchise building block, earn his full, contract and be plus value on his deal, whatever way you want to look at it?
Running pick and roll. That's where it is for him. The Miami Heat's problem, I know they made the finals run last year, but they won 44 games in the regular season, and the regular season sucked. Like it was super frustrating to watch that offense because the Kyle Lowry thing, we know this with older players. Once it happens, and he just wasn't the same guy anymore. And it became very apparent that he couldn't even start for that team. And obviously he had that long, like 2-month injury. So they had to start shifting their offense around. And what ended up being their best source of offense was Jimmy Butler. And it's always been their best source of offense. The problem is you can't just ask Jimmy Butler to do that in the regular season and carry that offense because you need him to do it in the postseason. And he's old and he's got the wear and tear on the tires and things like that. So you have to preserve him. So the entire year you had your like really efficient version of offense just standing there in Jimmy Butler, but you didn't want to overdo it. So they were trying to find this new version of like innings to eat up. What's our offense that we can just use to sustain us through the regular season? They ended up on the Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo pick and roll. And the problem with that is it was only okay. It wasn't a great source of offense, like per possession. There wasn't like totally great efficiency numbers. It wasn't like Embiid and Harden, right? It was fine. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. It was just fine. And so Miami's highest usage version of offense was not their most efficient offense. And it was just sort of a strange place for them to be in. So that's why for Tyler, it would just be, okay, pick that up. Because we know it's not Bam's problem, right? He might be the best screen setter in the NBA. He's a tremendous roller. He could finish above the rim. He developed that little midi shot and all those things. Tyler Herro just has to get better at finding the pockets, finding all that stuff, running that pick and roll, finding the cadence, picking his own spots to score out of that pick and roll set. That's what it all comes down to, because if he can be sort of a rinse and repeat pick and roll ball handler, that changes everything. That changes everything for the Miami Heat, because everything basically just snaps into place.
Do you have is your answer Tyler Herro, Brendan? Just to be sure.
Yeah, I had Herro too. I mean, I think we should mention Jimmy Butler, who had statistically one of his better seasons ever in the regular season last year. But when I tried to think about, okay, what happens if he's not as available, if he's not quite as efficient, and it's like, well, the next place you have to look is you would expect Herro to pick up that slack. So I just landed on Herro for that reason. But it'll be interesting to watch him this year, I think, for narrative reasons, but also as a basketball player.
Yes. All right, let's move on. Talk about player we're going to be talking about at the end of the season. Wes, who are you going with for this answer?
So I was trying to figure out, you guys sent me the questions beforehand, and I was like, okay, what's the spirit of this question? Because obviously we'll be talking about Jimmy Butler, because he's actually going to be eligible for an extension next summer, so we'll be talking about that. We're always talking about Bam Adebayo and why he got snubbed for Defensive Player of the Year. And so, but I wanted to avoid the obvious ones, and Tyler Herro included. So I'm going Haywood Highsmith. I think he's a really good player. I think defensively, he might be one of Miami's best 4 defenders, like right now. Offensively, he's basically a 0. But they have him watching like film on PJ Tucker for the last 2 years, and they've been working on his corner 3 a lot. And he only made the corner 3 last year at a 31% clip. If he can get that higher up to like 37, 38%, where it's a legit weapon, he could go from maybe like fringe rotation guy to potentially starting at power forward. Like that's what we're talking about in terms of the variance on Haywood Highsmith this year. And I'm going to bet on it. I like it. They keep him. The Heat will just cut bait if they don't think you got it. And they've kept him around now for 3 years for a reason. Right. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing if Haywood Highsmith, especially in training camp this week in Boca Raton, like if the reporting out of training camp is, oh yeah, that 3 is here, and this dude is like legitimately competing with Kevin Love to maybe even start the regular season as their starting power forward, I think that's totally in the cards for him.
Chris, you're our resident Midwesterner here. Do you know
Sure.
about Wheeling, West Virginia?
Do I know about Wheeling, West Virginia? It was near where I went to college in beautiful Athens,
Is that a
Ohio.
Jesuit school?
And
School,
the Wheeling is Wheeling is a Jesuit school. One of the best athletes of my rough time at where I went to high school went and played Division III basketball at Wheeling.
Is his name Haywood Highsmith?
Unfortunately not.
Haywood Highsmith is the only NBA player ever to come from that university, which is not exactly a surprise considering I didn't know that city existed until I clicked on the university next to his name on Basketball Reference. But yeah, that is the spirit of the question, Wes. That
Nailed it.
is kind of what we try to hit on. Although sometimes, it's like this guy's going to get traded or whatever. It's kind of inevitable. But I had Nikola Jovic, not exactly an under-the-radar person because of the trade talks. But, when you just look at the fact, he was a fairly well-regarded prospect in the first place. And then he went out at the FIBA tournament and shot 42% from 3, 57% overall, and had, nearly 3 assists to 1 turnover on a team that won the second place in the whole thing. Like that is about as solid as you could ask for somebody who I think kind of outplayed what I would have expected even his role to be on that team, let alone actually producing within that role. So he really has kind of leapt up in my expectations. I think the obvious other one would be Hawkes, but Jovic has played in more games and, going into his second season. And then to your point about Love and Highsmith and whatever, a little bit more of a pathway to like, if he really hits, then they need that. Like they need kind of help at that spot, maybe more so than wing. So I think that all kind of coalesced for me to pick Jovic. And I mean, do you think he'll play? Like, is he going to be playing minutes opening night, or where is he in the pecking order? Right now?
I think he's gonna play. I think it really helped that Eric Spoelstra was also a part of the FIBA World Cup and got to see Jovic up close and in person during the tournament. I know that they had several like meals together during the tournament as well. So I think they got closer in a way that they weren't able to during Jovic's rookie year, where he was mostly hurt. He could start too. We're talking about people who could start power forward. It wouldn't surprise me if by end of the year he was starting at power forward for them. Like, his feel for the game is so advanced. He's just so young, and he plays really young. It's like the decision-making part is sometimes questionable, but I was really impressed with what he did in FIBA because he just played a role that was much closer to what the Heat are asking him to do than what he used to do in international ball, where he was kind of a lead ball handler for his teams growing up. And this was much more of like all those threes that you're talking about, Brendan, were like catch and shoot threes. Like, all of them were catch and shoot threes. That's going to be much more in line with what he's doing at the NBA level. So I think it could be a really big year for Jovic. He might even be better than Robert Williams.
Chris?
Ooh, like that take. Love the spice, Wes. My answer is whichever one of Haywood Highsmith and Jovic actually asserts themselves. It's like that's the answer. Like that. Like, Kevin Love is a Hall of Famer. I think he was great for them and really useful for them. Almost like he could have helped a team that made the playoffs.
Or his old teammate
something.
James Jones, who, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But like, there's clearly a need for like a little more athleticism, just a little more juice, maybe just a little more like can go every night full go. And like, if one of those guys ascends, that's like, it's the cheeky answer that I thought about getting, but I'm just gonna say to see is like whatever guy in Sioux Falls we've never heard of that's like hitting 45% from three in January. That's the other answer here.
Yeah, Cole Swider. Watch out for him.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, just someone who's just like, I saw that guy play one college game randomly during the tournament, never thought of him again, and now he's like a starter for the Miami Heat.
Could always be that.
Yeah. Yes. All right, best case.
Lineup. No, best lineup.
Sorry, best lineup. Excuse me. I'm getting ahead of myself.
What do you got, Wes?
What's the best lineup from last year? What is the best lineup?
The best lineup from last year, which we like to do first. So high volume best lineup from last season was Vincent Herro, Martin Butler, Adebayo. If you want to take Herro out of it, I guess it would be Lowry, Strus, Martin Butler, Adebayo. If just, I think that would probably be different for the playoffs. I didn't pull that, but that's kind of what we're talking about. So what did you have?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Tyler Herro because I think a lot of people are sort of surprised by the fact that a lot of Miami's best lineups included Tyler Herro last year, the high volume lineups. I think the best lineup this year is going to be Tyler Herro, Josh Richardson, Caleb Martin, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. That's 4 very high-end defenders. And Tyler Herro, right? So you got 4 defenders to sort of cover up for his deficiencies. And then you have some legit scoring between, obviously, Jimmy, Tyler Herro, and if it's a good Caleb Martin night, then also Caleb Martin. And then Bam, obviously, who averaged 20 points per game last year. So, I think that lineup's going to be really strong for them. I don't think that'll be the starting lineup for them. I would probably pencil in Kevin Love as the power forward and probably Josh Richardson at the 2 with Caleb Martin still coming off the bench. But that's going to be a lineup that they get to probably in every half, I would expect. Maybe even to end each half would be, again, Tyler Herro at sort of quote-unquote point guard, Josh Richardson, Jimmy Butler, Caleb Martin, and Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, I had the same thing, and I actually was thinking that it would start, but your read on it, I'm sure, is better, and they did start Love in the playoffs, so you're probably right. But I like that as their closing lineup, and it's the best kind of two-way thing I think you can cobble together here. The best playoff lineup, just to say it, was Lowry, Duncan Robinson, Martin Butler, Adebayo, which is just hilarious. But what did you have, Chris?
I have the same as Wes. I think this is pretty straightforward. I think there will be some lineups that just end up popping in ways we don't expect. I'm curious just to see, how they replace Strus, how they replace some of the things that have gone. I think there's some of the numbers when you look at them from their laps this year do have some weirdness to them. Like Victor Oladipo is just like randomly in like a bunch of their most used lineups last year, and obviously he got hurt and it's gone now. But I really just kind of think it's the core of this team. It's going to just be it's going to be Jimmy and Bam, obviously. I think Hero's that third peg on this version of that team, and then it's whatever other two pieces click in whatever way. Is it Jovic? Is it Highsmith? Is it Is it Caleb? Like what? I've been confusing wings all night. Is it Kevin Love? Is
they
it
like Hakas too? They
pick
like
someone
Hakas
else
a lot.
Yeah, is it Hackett, who was good in summer league? Like, just someone just ascend in a way that is just like, sure. And I mean, I still wouldn't count out that there's just the fifth starter on this team,
Right.
is someone they trade for in
I would be very
3 months.
surprised if the roster right now is the roster that is there post trade deadline. Right. I think this team has to make a move, and they might have to make a move sooner rather than later, given the moves that their rivals in the East have already made recently. So. We'll see, but I think generally speaking, this team is already deeper than last year. I know that they lost Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, but you added Josh Richardson. You basically replaced Max Strus with Josh Richardson, which I think is pretty even. I think that's just like a 1-for-1 almost replacement. You do lose Gabe Vincent, and that's tough because you don't really have a real other point. Like the only real point guard on the roster is Lowry. I think they're going to continue to bring him off the bench. That was his best stretch last season, was kind of managing his minutes in that way. But with Jovic being healthy, with adding Jaquez, Haywood Highsmith ready to probably take another leap, and all these guys, fire alarm. I think they're a little bit deeper than they were last season.
The best case that I had revolves around trades as well. I think, to me, Chris, I don't see a lot of upside that Lowry and Duncan Robinson are going to pull magic out of their hat, rabbit out of their hat one more time. So those guys being traded feels like a closer pathway to hitting the highest of upsides. I don't think it's out of the question that both Highsmith and Jovic hit, and maybe they have to if they consolidate some of these players. So I look at all of that and just come to the conclusion that a best case scenario is that they stay afloat, consolidate into one more starting caliber, if not a little better than that, good starter caliber player at some point this season, and by the end of April, or by April, they're better than what we're talking about them being right now. But I don't know who that is. I don't really know what that all looks like, but that kind of feels like the best case, because otherwise, if I'm just going based on this roster, probably pretty similar to last year, honestly. Can they get the 6th seed?
Yeah, that would be the goal, I think.
I think avoiding the play-in with this roster would be a great goal for them, and I think there's a window there. The other thing I would add is I think the best version of this team is going to involve the best defensive season we've ever seen from a guy we haven't talked about, and that's Bam Adebayo, who, if I had to pick today, I might pick him for Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's good enough where he is just going to win one at some point, and it's why not now? And why can't that guy be the anchor of what this team is? I think this team is, Wes, tell me if you think this is wrong, but I think there is a little bit of, you got to take some of the responsibility to drag this team off of Jimmy's shoulders and off of, he's 34. At some point you do need more, and Bam is the obvious guy to do that, I think, especially defensively, tone setting wise, and I think a little bit more offensively if you can get it. But I do think
the offense. I mean, how much more can the dude do on defense? He's maybe the most versatile, best defender in the NBA.
I want him to get rewarded. I think he just is one of those guys that I should have Defensive Player of the Year winner next to his CV on his CV. Let's get it to him.
It's crazy that he didn't win it 2 years ago. But I do think the thing with Bam is he is. You're right. He's sort of just by default the guy that has to take some of that the scoring responsibility off of Jimmy Butler, and his reputation because of that has suffered a little bit. There's a lot of people are oh, why can't he dominate and be this 25 point per game scorer? Meanwhile, he is literally elite at his position at literally everything else. He is an elite passer at his position. If you don't count Jovic or Jokic because throwing off the scale, he is an elite passer at his position. He is an elite screen setter at his position. I think he's the best defensive player in the NBA, so he's an elite defender at his position. He is elite at everything. Even his rebounding numbers, the raw per game numbers aren't great, but his percentage numbers are amazing. The Heat's rebounding percentage when he's on the court are great because guess what? He also had the most box outs in the NBA last year for a star, and he's doing that kind of thing. So he's so elite at everything, and he's pretty good as an offensive player, but he's not elite as just a scorer, right? And unfortunately, the Heat are asking him to also be like, hey, all this stuff that you're elite at, can you also be a 25 point per game scorer for us? And that is so hard. That's basically you're asking him to be Jokic. You're asking him to be Giannis. You're asking him to be Embiid. And there's just like not a lot of those kinds of guys.
Yeah.
So it would have been great if they could have gotten Damian Lillard. And then all of a sudden you're asking him to do a lot less of that kind of stuff. And you can just lean into being elite at all those things. But they do, Chris, to your point, they just kind of need him to do it anyway. It sucks. Like, hey, I'm sorry we have to ask for you to do this, but you're also kind of the only guy that can do this, which is why, again, I go back to the Tyler Herro Bam pick and roll. If you can kind of like spread some of that responsibility into a 2-man game instead of just like, Bam, hey, can you get to the free throw line and hit a 15-footer like every other possession? It's just a little bit easier on Bam for that reason. So, but I'm with you. He's got to win Defensive Player of the Year at some point. I think he's an awesome player. And I think if you look at the Heat, they have 2 top 20 players in the NBA. I put Bam up there, and it's just like, where does the third guy rank? And then what's the difference between the third and the fourth guy? Like, they have 2 legitimately elite players. But if you were to do like when NBA rank comes out, like I'll be really interested to see like, where does Tyler Herro come in? Is he their third best player? Are they going to put Caleb Martin as their third best player? Like, I don't know. And is that like the 88th second best player?
Yeah.
That's just not going to be good enough,
Yeah. So the over under number is 46.5, which feels super high. This team in the regular season last year was 41 win team statistically, 44 win team in the standings. And again, with what they got from Butler, the fact that they didn't add a huge piece, I just have a hard time seeing the path to the over unless you're telling me that there is some unforeseen trade, which I think Heat fans will pull their hair out if we talk too much about that again. But so I don't know. I'm going under. I have a hard time making the case for the over.
Chris, I want to hear what you have to say before I do my thing.
I lean under just because I think there's a lot of like proof. All the posturing about the Dame trade, all of the indications about what this team believes in itself, and the fact that like Jimmy's going to miss some time.
Yep.
I just think they're probably going to be like we're the 6th seed and then get like the Knicks or the Cavs in the round 1 and be like, all right, we're going to kick the shit out of this team anyway. Like they're just not going to care. They don't like Cleveland, New York, to a lesser extent, Boston, Milwaukee, all the teams that we think are ahead of them and that you should maximize the regular season as much as possible. Why did recent history tells us the Heat should not give an absolute shit as long as they are in fighting position to just then show up and kick ass.
Yeah, getting in the play-in tournament last year was their worst case scenario, right? And then they still went to the NBA Finals. So I think that they'll be better than they were in the regular season last year. I don't know if that's going to be more wins. Like statistically, they were not even a 44-win team. Like they were a bad team, right? And they won a lot of clutch time games. Like they were very good in clutch time. And Tyler Herro, by the way, was a big part of that. So, but also their 3-point shooting just went in the toilet. When the year prior, they were the best 3-point shooting team in the league by percentage. The reality is probably somewhere in the middle, right? I don't think that they're as bad as they were last year, and I don't think they're as good a 3-point shooting team as they were 2 years ago when they were the number 1 seed. So if that 3-point shooting just like kind of reverts back up to the mean a little bit more, that should just lead to a few more wins, I would imagine. But if the over-under is 46.5, I'll take the under. I think a lot of Heat fans would say, well, the team, like they'll cite the 3-point shooting numbers because that's a very popular number down here in Miami. And then say, and then like that year they won 53 games, right? So we're probably closer to the 53 games. My argument is, since Jimmy Butler arrived in Miami, they won 44 games, 40 games, 53 games, and 44 games, right? They've basically been a slightly above 500 team for most of Jimmy Butler's time in the regular season, most of Jimmy Butler's stint in Miami. So this is not a team that I don't think that they figured out that the regular season doesn't matter. Like, again, they don't want to be in the play-in tournament. They would much rather be the number 1 seed than the 8th seed. But the goal should be, hey, let's just be healthy as possible, especially Jimmy and Bam. Be as healthy as possible getting into the playoffs, and let's just avoid having to do the play-in tournament thing because there's too much of a wild card there. So the answer's under. I don't know if I said that yet.
Yeah, under, and yet no one's going to want to see them in round 1.
Right. Under and scary.